Every football fan remembers that night against Barcelona, but few know the heartbreaking tale that followed. It's 2011. You're sitting at the Emirates Stadium. A fearless, 19-year-old midfield maestro is bossing Barcelona, the greatest team on the planet. He's threading passes like a magician, twisting and turning past players like he's a cheat code. That teenager was Jack Wilshere, the golden boy of English football. Arsenal fans called him the future. England fans called him the savior. But then, it all went wrong. So wrong. Today, we're diving into the tragic tale of Jack Wilshere's career, a story of genius brought to its knees by injury. Grab a cup of tea or a stiff drink, and let's dissect the rise, fall, and what could have been for this football prodigy. Chapter 1. The Golden Boy emerges. Wilshere became Arsenal's youngest league debutant in 2008, aged just 16, and just 3 years later produced a Champions League performance against Barcelona that put the rest of Europe on red alert. However, 7 years later he found himself being shown the Emirates exit door, with his boyhood club finally resigned to the fact that Wilshere wouldn't meet his potential, largely due to repetitive injuries. Football fans, prepare to be heartbroken. This is how injuries stole one of the brightest talents of our generation. Wilshere burst onto the scene as a precocious talent in Arsenal's youth academy. By the time he was 16, Arsene Wenger had seen enough to fast-track him to the first team. And boy, did he deliver. Remember that performance against Barcelona in the Champions League? Wilshere outclassed Xavi and Iniesta, legends of the game, and made them look ordinary. The media couldn't get enough. The next Paul Gascoigne, they said. English Iniesta, they screamed. Let's not forget, Wilshere wasn't just good, he was fearless. He played with the swagger of a player who thought his ankles were made of titanium. Spoiler alert, they weren't.
Giroud, Rosicky, Wilshere, good stop, what a goal from Jack Wilshere! And his first Premier League goal.
Chapter 2. The first cracks appear. In 2011, Jack suffered a stress fracture in his ankle during a pre-season game. At first, it seemed minor, just a few weeks out, they said. Weeks turned into months, months turned into a year. Problem? This wasn't just an injury, it was a signal of what was to come. He did have the stress fracture, repaired by 2 world-renowned surgeons, but his ankle was never the same again. Wilshere's playing style, aggressive, dynamic, always on the edge, was his biggest strength, but also his Achilles heel. The ankle injury set off a chain reaction. A stress fracture here, ligament damage there, and then surgery. Lots of surgery. In interviews, you could see the toll on his face. Wilshere once admitted that every injury felt like starting from scratch. The constant cycle of recovery, rehabilitation, and reintegration into the team left him drained, both physically and emotionally. No matter how hard he worked, there was always the lingering fear. What if it happens again? Speaking on a YouTube podcast this month, Wilshere gave a fascinating insight into the worst injury of his professional career. My first injury was my worst, and I paid the price a lot for that. The former Arsenal midfielder said, it was my right ankle. It was the talus, which is a little bone that sits on top of your fibula and your ankle joint, and I fractured that. I went to see the specialist surgeon. He was like, wow, I've only seen that in one person, and it was a cinnaboard. They got in another specialist to do the surgery, and I didn't know this until a few years later when I returned to see them. It must have been about 6 years. I was 19 when the injury happened. 6 years later, I was 25. So I went back to see the surgeon and he was like, are you still playing? He showed me the notes from the surgery and they said, you might not play again, might not be able to walk. Foster questioned why he wasn't told that after the initial surgery, but later said, it's maybe a good thing that you didn't know, to be honest. Wilshere would later be forced to have surgery on his knee and calf bone during an injury-plagued spell at Arsenal, which saw him miss over 100 games. By the time Jack returned, he was a shadow of the fearless teenager who danced past Barcelona, but he wasn't ready to give up. Downward spiral. Injuries weren't just a part of Jack Wilshere's story, they were the story. By 2013, The list of injuries was almost laughable. Ankles, knees, foot fractures, hamstring tears. If it could break, Wilshere had probably broken. And yet, every time he came back, there was hope. That 2013 FA Cup final, Wilshere came on and showed flashes of brilliance. That lone spell at Bournemouth, brief glimpses of the old Jack were still there. But consistency, nowhere to be found. His body simply couldn't handle the demands of professional football anymore. You could see the frustration on his face. Every time he limped off, it wasn't just pain, it was heartbreak. Medical professionals often talk about how recurring injuries can create weak links in the body, and Wilshere's case was a textbook example. Despite having access to world-class physiotherapy, there's only so much you can do when the foundation has been compromised. By the time he hit his mid-20s, his body was struggling to keep up with the physical demands of Premier League football. And Arsenal, they had to move on. They couldn't build a team around a player who was more likely to be in the physio room than on the pitch. Many fans argue that Wenger's over-reliance on Wilshere as a teenager contributed to his early physical burnout. Playing week in and week out against grown men in one of the toughest leagues in the world took its toll. Would things have been different if Wilshere had been eased into senior football more gradually? Perhaps.
Brad, let's go, Rod, let's go! Intentions over outcomes. You keep doing the right thing, outcome will look after itself. Keep it, good under.
Chapter 4. Legacy and what could have been. By the time Wilshere left Arsenal in 2018, it felt like the end of an era. He had flashes of brilliance at West Ham and even Bournemouth, but it wasn't the same. Jack Wilshere's story is the ultimate what-if in football. What if he'd stayed injury-free? Could he have led Arsenal to Premier League glory? Could he have carried England to a major tournament? We'll never know. But let's give credit where it's due. Despite the setback, Jack never stopped fighting. He retired young, yes, but he also gave us memory. That Barcelona night, those defense-splitting passes, that raw passion. So, here's to Jack Wilshere, a talent and a cautionary tale for every young player who thinks they're invincible. Football is a cruel game. For every Messi or Ronaldo, there's a Jack Wilshere, a player with all the talent in the world, but a body that simply couldn't keep up. For all the heartbreak, Wilshere's story isn't just a tragedy, it's a lesson. It's a reminder of how fragile a footballer's career can be and how even the brightest talents need careful management. Jack Wilshere's legacy might not be in the trophies he won or the career stats he accumulated, but in the memories he created and the cautionary tale he became. Even in retirement, Wilshere continues to inspire. His resilience in the face of adversity, refusal to give up, and ability to find a new path post-football speak volumes about his character. His story will always be bittersweet, but it's one that football fans won't forget. Let's not remember Jack for what he didn't do. Let's remember him for the joy he brought when he was at his best, for that fearless teenager who made us believe anything was possible. And if you've made it this far, you clearly love football stories as much as I do. So, why not stick around? Hit that subscribe button and let's relive the highs, lows, and everything in between of the beautiful game.